Well, today we're going to look at week 4 of our Encounter series, a story from Luke chapter 12 where Jesus encounters a worrier. And what we're going to discover in the story is that the primary focus of this man's worry and concern in life is his money, it's financial security. And Jesus basically gets real blunt with him and calls him a fool for making that his big worry in life. And we're going to learn about this, that when we pursue money over God, that we also become fools. Well, let's look how the story begins. In John chapter 12, starting in verse 13, it says this: "Then someone called from the crowd, 'Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me.'" Now, the setup for this is what makes it interesting. It says right before this that there were literally thousands of people all clamoring around Jesus, all trying to hear what he has to say. And Jesus has been teaching on some really important topics about life and death and eternity and how to connect with God. And this guy has managed to fight his way to the front of the crowd. And when he finally gets his opportunity to speak to Jesus, what does he bring up? Money. And that shows what's really important in this man's heart. Well, look at how Jesus responds to him. Jesus replied, "Friend, who has made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed, for life is not measured by how much you own." Jesus appears to be taken aback as well. Again, this guy didn't ask a question responding to any of the things that Jesus had been talking about. Instead, he brings up the topic of money. And Jesus basically says, "Why are you bugging me about that?" And he goes on to warn him against the danger of greed in our own life. And to do so, he tells this little story. It's a little parable. It says this in verse 16. "And then he told him a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. And he said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops.' Then he said, 'I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room to store all of my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have stored away enough for years to come. Now take it easy, eat and drink and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you've worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Jesus basically brings this point home and says, hey, if you have got lots of money, but you have neglected your relationship with God, you are a fool. If your primary concern in this life is seeking security and happiness through finances, then you're crazy. But then he goes on and he addresses kind of the other end of the spectrum. First, he's talking to people who have lots of money and they put their hope in that money. But then he talks to people who don't have a lot of money. He addresses the poor. So look what he says starting down in verse 22. "Then, turning to his disciples, Jesus said, 'That is why I tell you, do not worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food to eat or clothes to wear. For life is more than food, and your body is more than clothing.' Jesus says, 'Look at the ravens. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for God feeds them. And you are far more valuable to him than birds. Can all of your worries add a single moment to your life? And if worry can't accomplish a little thing like that, what's the use of worrying over bigger things? And don't be concerned about what to eat and what to drink. Don't worry about such things. These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers all over the world, but your Father already knows your needs." Basically, Jesus says, when you let thoughts and concerns about the basic necessities of life, like food and clothing, when that dominates your mind, you're acting like an unbeliever. That followers of Jesus, we should think differently about our money, whether we have a lot of money or whether we're struggling not to have enough money. He's saying that when we are consumed with worry over those things of life, we are acting like unbelievers. And ultimately, we are demonstrating that we don't really trust God. So, how do we overcome this? Well, the point Jesus goes on to make is that the only way to overcome this kind of worry in your life is to pursue God first. Look what he says in verse 31. "Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will then give you everything you need." You see, the only way we can really find true peace and satisfaction in this life is not through financial security or the supposed happiness we think it's going to bring us. It is by seeking God first. That just means that God should be our highest priority in life. It should be what we think about the most. God should be the one that we are most concerned about pleasing in this life. And here's the good news. Seeking God first isn't some complicated religious system that only really smart people can figure it out. It's as simple as trusting Jesus, honoring God, and helping people. Those are the basic steps of what it means to pursue God first in your life. It has to begin with you trusting in Jesus. That means putting your faith in Him and Him alone for the forgiveness of your sin. That's how you begin a relationship with God. And if you haven't done that by trusting Jesus, well, then you certainly can't seek Him first. But then it means honoring God with our lives, and that includes honoring Him with how we treat our spouse, how we treat other people, the words we use, and how we spend our money. If God really is the most important thing in our life, that should be reflected in how we budget and how we use our practical resources. And finally, it means helping other people. That means if you don't have time to help other people in your life, God probably isn't first in your life. If you say, hey, I'm too busy to help this person, I'm too busy to try to lead someone to Jesus, you don't have God as a priority in your life. And so if you want to make sure that you are seeking God first, start by trusting Jesus. Make sure you are honoring God in every area of your life, including your finances, and make sure that you are helping other people. That is how you overcome worry. That is how you will find true satisfaction and peace in this life, not through money, but through seeking God first. So why don't you go ahead and pause now and discuss these questions.